So imagine a scenario for a second, just to kind of kick things off today.
Okay, I am ready.
You have two people, right? And they're both living in Canada. Both of them hold Canadian passports, and both of them are packing their bags for like a quick weekend drive across the border into the United States.
Sounds like a standard weekend trip.
Exactly. Now, one of these travelers is strictly a Canadian citizen, born there, raised there, only has Canadian nationality.
Right.
But the other traveler is actually a dual U.S. Canadian citizen. Maybe they were born in the States but lived their whole adult life up north. But there is a catch.
There's always a catch.
Their U.S. passport is expired, so they just grab their valid Canadian passport and head to the border, figuring, it's all the same. So who do you think has an easier time crossing into the United States?
Well, logic would dictate that it is the person who actually belongs to the country they are trying to enter, right? The U.S. citizen should have the absolute advantage there.
Right. You would assume the U.S. citizen gets waved right through, but the reality is completely backwards. The person who is only Canadian glides right across that border.
Wow.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the dual citizen, the one who actually holds U.S. citizenship, is technically in violation of United States law the very moment they try to enter without a valid, unexpired U.S. passport.
It is a phenomenal riddle. And honestly, it perfectly frames our mission for you today in this deep dive.
It really does.
Because today we are exploring this really fascinating article by John Richardson. And it examines U.S. expats, dual citizens, and the incredibly peculiar legal status of the expired U.S. passport.
We are going to navigate this bizarre legal labyrinth where your constitutional rights collide head-on with bureaucratic travel restrictions.
Exactly.
And by the end of this, you are going to understand why an expired U.S. passport is simultaneously a golden ticket and a massive legal headache.
It's a huge headache, and I think it's important to note for you listening right off the bat that we are strictly examining John Richardson's legal arguments here.
Right, just the legal side.
Yeah, because while some view strict border requirements as vital for national security, Richardson basically argues that they function as a cumbersome administrative burden on citizens. So we're not endorsing any political viewpoints today, just unpacking the fascinating legal friction contained in the source material.
Because the stakes here go far beyond just travel logistics or, airport lines.
Oh, absolutely. This is a fundamental look at how the law separates who you are from what you are required to do.
Exactly.
It really explores the friction between your identity as a citizen and the administrative rules you are forced to follow just because of that identity.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to really understand that border riddle we just talked about, we have to look at the unexpected burdens of holding U.S. citizenship, especially if you live abroad.
Right.
The source material brings up this incredibly provocative concept. It says that in some instances, U.S. citizenship can actually act as a disability.
Yeah, a disability. The author uses that specific word to highlight a very real phenomenon.
It's a strong word to use.
It is, but think about it. There are individuals who have never even lived in the United States, yet because of the circumstances of their birth, they are U.S. citizens.
Right, accidental American.
Exactly. And with that citizenship comes a really heavy set of obligations. We are talking about severe restrictions on accessing local financial accounts, citizenship-based taxation, and travel friction that non-citizens completely bypass.
Yeah, the source mentions these acronyms like FTISA and FBAR.
Which sound like alphabet soup.
They really do. If you are not living the expat life, you probably have no idea what those are. But FTISA is the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, and FBAR is the Report of Foreign Bank and Financial Accounts.
Basically, massive reporting requirements.
Huge. If you live in London or Toronto as a U.S. citizen, you can't just, easily open a standard checking account to pay your local rent.
No, you
Your
can't.
foreign bank has to report your financial data back to the U.S. government, which is such a massive compliance headache that a lot of foreign banks simply refuse to do business with U.S. citizens.
Which leaves these individuals financially marginalized in the very countries where they actually reside.
It's crazy.
It is a stunning realization that the U.S. is one of the only countries on Earth that taxes based on citizenship rather than residency.
Just a massive burden.
Yeah, so you're dealing with these massive financial burdens, and then you try to travel only to find out your citizenship complicates that as well.
Think of it like a homeowner trying to get into their own gated community.
Okay, I like this analogy.
Right, so you own the house, you have the ultimate right to be there, the Constitution is your property deed.
Makes sense.
But the Homeowners Association, which in this case is Congress, has created a rule that says you can only open the front gate if you have a very specific unexpired proximity key card, and that key card is your valid U.S. passport.
Right, the plastic key card.
Exactly. Meanwhile, a plumber or a delivery driver, are non-citizens in this analogy, they can just show their standard ID to the guard and get waved right in.
Wow. Yeah.
So the homeowner is suddenly stuck arguing at the gate, facing hurdles the visitors don't have to deal with, simply because of the specific rules attached to their status as an owner.
What's fascinating here is how that analogy highlights the foundational principle of Richardson's article.
How so?
Well, the circumstances that determine whether you are a U.S. citizen are completely detached from the restrictions that are applied to you because you are a U.S. citizen.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, the government has one set of rules for granting you the title and a completely different set of rules for how you are actually allowed to use it.
So let's establish the bedrock first. How do you get the title and what rights come with it?
We look to the Constitution for that.
Right.
Under the 14th Amendment, it is broadly interpreted that all persons born or naturalized in the United States are U.S. citizens.
Pretty straightforward.
Very. And the Supreme Court reinforced this in a landmark case called Afrayim v. Rusk, which basically established that Congress cannot simply strip you of your citizenship. Yeah, once you have it, you have a right to remain a U.S. citizen,
Yeah.
barring a voluntary and very complicated formal renunciation process.
And it is not just the 14th Amendment covering people born in, like, Ohio or Texas.
No, not at all.
The source references 8 U.S. Code 1401, which is this mind-bendingly granular list of ways you can be a citizen at birth, even if you were born completely outside the U.S.
It's incredibly detailed.
Yeah, it covers people born to 2 citizen parents abroad, or 1 citizen parent who meets specific physical presence requirements.
Right.
There are even these wild historical clauses covering people born before noon Eastern Standard Time on May 24th, 1934, under very specific parental conditions.
That is so specific.
I know, the code is exhausting, but if you check one of those boxes, you are a citizen, period.
And holding that citizenship grants you an undeniable right to return to the United States.
Undeniable.
Exactly.
Ugh.
Which brings us to another landmark Supreme Court case the text relies on heavily. That is United States v. Wong Kim Ark.
Oh, the story behind Wong Kim Ark is incredible.
It really is.
We are talking about 1898. Wong Kim Ark was born in San Francisco to Chinese immigrant parents.
Right, on U.S. soil.
On U.S. soil. So he grows up, travels to China for a visit, and when he tries to come back home to San Francisco, the authorities deny him entry.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, they claim that because his parents were subjects of the Emperor of China, he wasn't a U.S. citizen despite being born right there in California.
And his case went all the way to the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
And the ruling was just monumental.
What did they decide?
The court ruled in his favor, firmly establishing birthright citizenship under the 14th Amendment.
Okay.
But for our purposes today, the most critical part of that ruling is the affirmation that a citizen has an inherent fundamental right to enter into and reside in the United States.
Meaning they can't lock you out.
Exactly. The government cannot lock a citizen out of their own country.
So the Supreme Court unequivocally says I have a fundamental right to enter my own country.
Yes.
That feels incredibly solid. But Congress built a very large legislative roadblock right in front of that Supreme Court ruling.
They certainly did.
Because I am looking at the statutory restriction from the source material. It is a federal law that essentially makes it unlawful for any U.S. citizen to depart from or enter the United States unless they bear a valid, unexpired United States passport.
And there's the clash.
Yeah.
The Constitution says you have the undeniable right to enter. But the statute says it is unlawful to do so without a valid passport.
I have to challenge the logic of this system, though.
Go for it.
If Wong Kim Ark guarantees my inherent right to enter my country, how does a law passed by Congress saying, I need an unexpired passport, not immediately get struck down as unconstitutional?
That's a great question.
Right, because if I have a constitutional right to enter, shouldn't I have a statutory entitlement to actually get the passport? If they demand it at the border, they have to give it to me, right?
That is the most logical assumption you could make, but the legal reality is quite different.
Really?
Yeah. There is absolutely no statutory entitlement to a U.S. passport.
Wait, none?
None. The source material is adamant on this point. While only those who owe allegiance to the United States are eligible to be issued a passport, the government is not required to give you one just because you ask for it.
Yeah, that's wild.
The State Department can deny a passport for a whole variety of reasons. Unpaid child support, certain felony convictions, or unpaid taxes.
That feels incredibly precarious.
What is?
You are legally required to have a document to exercise your constitutional right to come home, but the government can administratively withhold that exact document.
Which reveals the changing nature of the passport itself.
How so?
Well, the article notes that historically, centuries ago, a passport was essentially a polite letter of introduction from a sovereign.
Like a permission slip for other countries?
Exactly. It was a request to foreign nations to grant the traveler safe passage and protection.
Okay, that makes sense.
But over time, especially accelerating around the First World War, it evolved into an instrument of control.
An instrument of control.
Yeah. It transformed from a shield protecting you abroad into a tracking device and a permission slip managed by your own government.
Wow.
If they can deny or delay the passport, they can effectively control your ability to travel, even if they can't constitutionally strip your citizenship.
So let's visualize how this theoretical legal battle actually plays out in the real world.
Let's do it.
Imagine you are the listener, and you are standing at the Customs and Border Protection Desk, the CBP booth, at an international airport.
Okay, picture the fluorescent lights.
Right. And you are sweating a little bit because you only have an expired U.S. passport in your hand.
Not a good feeling.
Not at all. The CBP agent is staring at you. My head would be spinning if I were that agent.
Oh, absolutely.
Do I follow the statute that says this person is breaking the law or the Constitution that says they have a right to be here? Who wins?
The agent is caught directly in the crossfire of this paradox.
Yeah.
Because an expired passport is universally understood to be invalid for travel. It violates the federal statute.
Right.
But an expired passport is still definitive proof of U.S. citizenship.
Although proof of citizenship is not the same thing as a valid travel document.
Exactly.
Like, you could have a U.S. birth certificate or a consular report of birth abroad.
Sure.
Those prove you are a citizen, but try handing a birth certificate to an airline gate agent in Paris.
They will laugh at you.
They will not let you on the plane. Practically speaking, if you are flying commercial, the airline enforces the statute for the government.
Yes, they do.
They will look at the expiration date and deny you boarding long before you ever see a U.S. border agent.
But let's say you drive to a land border crossing, like the Peace Bridge from Canada, or you somehow make it to the CBP booth at an airport.
Okay, you're at the booth.
The dynamic shifts entirely.
Why?
The CBP cannot permanently deny entry to a proven U.S. citizen without violating the Wong Kim Ark precedent.
Because the expired passport proves your identity.
Yes.
And once your identity as a citizen is proven, the constitutional right to enter completely overrules this statutory restriction.
Precisely. They cannot leave you in a stateless limbo in the airport terminal forever. They cannot deport you to another country.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though.
Oh, yeah.
Because the statutory requirement creates a massive documentation hurdle, it doesn't authorize the denial of entry, like you said.
Right.
But the source is very clear about the reality of this process. You will eventually get in, but it is going to be incredibly unpleasant.
Highly unpleasant.
You can expect massive delays. You will almost certainly be pulled into secondary inspection, sitting in a room for hours while they run databases and verify your identity.
That's fine.
You will be interrogated about why you are traveling without valid documents. It is an exercise in administrative punishment.
It really is.
So for you listening, I want you to picture the specific anxiety of standing at that border booth, knowing you might be detained for hours.
Yeah, keep that in mind.
This is why our most direct piece of practical advice from today's deep dive is this. If you ever find an expired U.S. passport sitting in the back of your drawer, do not throw it away.
Never.
Even if the photo is 20 years old. It is a vital, irrefutable proof of citizenship.
It really is.
It will not buy you a smooth trip through the airport, but it is the ultimate proof of who you are, and that proof is what eventually forces the heavy doors of the border to open.
It acts as your ultimate safety net.
Exactly.
The government strongly prefers you use a valid passport, and they make it unlawful not to. But the bureaucracy is fully aware of its own limitations.
Let's look at those limitations.
Okay.
Because we have spent this whole time establishing that the valid passport rule is incredibly strict.
Very strict.
It says it is unlawful to depart or enter without it. Yet, if you dig into the federal regulations, the system deliberately sabotages its own ironclad rule with a labyrinth of exceptions.
A total labyrinth. The source points to a specific section of the Code of Federal Regulations detailing the exemptions to the travel restriction.
Right.
And when you analyze why these exemptions exist, you start to see the cracks in the government's absolute demand for passports.
Some of the carve-outs are wild.
Let's hear them.
Okay, so You do not need a valid U.S. passport to enter or depart if you are active duty military with orders and a military ID.
That seems logical for troop movements.
It does. But you also don't need one if you are a U.S. citizen seaman on maritime business carrying a merchant marine document.
Ah, a very specific regulatory release valve for the maritime shipping industry.
It gets even more specific than that.
Oh,
You don't need a passport if you are traveling entirely within the Western Hemisphere on a closed-loop cruise ship,
a closed-loop cruise.
meaning you leave from a port in Miami, sail to the Bahamas, and return to that exact same port in Miami on the same ship.
Right.
In that scenario, you can just use a driver's license and a birth certificate.
So the requirement for the ultimate national security travel document suddenly vanishes when a $500 weekend vacation package is involved.
Exactly. And what about this one? A child under 16 or under 19, if they are with a supervised school, religious, or sports group, crossing a land or sea border from Canada or Mexico with just a birth certificate. Right. A 15-year-old on a hockey trip to Toronto can just wave a copy of their birth certificate and a letter from their coach.
A letter from the coach.
Yeah. There are also exceptions for members of trusted traveler programs like NEXUS or FAST, or people working on the International Boundary and Water Commission.
This raises an important question, though, because what is critical to understand is that things like merchant marine documents or NEXUS cards or, a letter from a hockey coach are absolutely not sufficient to establish citizenship if you were trying to apply for a passport.
The State Department would reject them instantly.
Right. Yet the Border Patrol accepts them in lieu of a passport to let you cross.
So why would a rigid security system deliberately create these loopholes?
It's a great question.
If the government is so obsessed with the travel requirement that they make it unlawful for a citizen to cross without a passport, why do they suddenly look the other way for a carnival cruise or a youth sports tournament?
Well, it really comes down to the brutal reality of economics versus security. Yeah, these exemptions highlight the pragmatic friction of international borders. The government is constantly attempting to balance draconian security measures with the economic realities of daily life.
That makes a lot of sense.
If you require every single teenager on a cross-border sports team to drop $130 and wait 10 weeks for a passport, you effectively kill youth sports leagues in border states.
Completely.
If you demand a passport for every single passenger on a 3-day loop to Mexico, you devastate the multi-billion-dollar maritime tourism industry.
So they need the border to be a fortress, but they also need the drawbridge to move quickly for commerce.
Exactly. Absolute adherence to the passport statute would grind cross-border trade, tourism, and maritime logistics to a complete halt.
Right.
The bureaucracy admits that its own rules are too rigid to survive contact with the real world, so they carve out these highly specific exceptions to keep the economy moving.
Leaving us with a system completely full of contradictions.
Riddled with...
A system where an expired passport proves you are a citizen, but makes you a lawbreaker for trying to come home. Unless you happen to be on a cruise ship or playing ice hockey.
It sounds absurd when you put it like that.
So what does this all mean?
Good question.
If we step back and synthesize everything we've covered today from John Richardson's analysis, the ultimate takeaway for you is that an expired U.S. passport is a deeply paradoxical document.
It really is.
On one hand, it proves exactly who you are. It guarantees your ultimate constitutional right under Wong Kim Ark to go home.
Yes.
But on the other hand, it completely fails as a tool to get you there smoothly, turning you into a violator of statutory law the very moment you present it.
And even if you never plan to live abroad or you never plan to hold dual citizenship, understanding this tension is just vital.
It is.
This clash between your inherent constitutional rights and the heavy administrative rules layered on top of them is the defining characteristic of modern life. It forces you to realize that possessing a right is not the same thing as being allowed to exercise it without friction.
It is the homeowner arguing with the HOA at the gate all over again.
Exactly that.
But I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over.
Let's hear it.
We discussed how obligations like FASA make U.S. citizenship feel like a severe burden for those living abroad.
Right.
Historically, a passport was a document meant to ensure a sovereign's protection over its citizens as they traveled the world. It was a shield against foreign
A
threats.
protective shield.
Right.
Okay.
But if you look at the financial reporting, the tracking, the tax compliance, and the rigid travel control we just discussed, if the passport now functions largely as an instrument of administrative control rather than international protection, it raises a massive question for the modern citizen.
A very heavy question.
At what point do the administrative burdens and compliance requirements of a nationality outweigh its fundamental privileges? Right. When you are that dual citizen standing at the Canadian border, looking at your valid Canadian passport that lets you travel freely, and your expired U.S. passport that guarantees your right to enter but labels you a lawbreaker, you really have to wonder which one is actually the golden ticket and which one is just the velvet rope.